potatoes of today's presentation are Michael talking about what is humanistic leadership. As I mentioned to some of you were signing in, we will have a Mentimeter interaction, some online polling for you. After Michael's done, before we do questions, we're going to go into a breakout group discussion. I'll divide you up into different breakout groups to talk with other colleagues, and then we will have time for questions and dialogue at the end. Michael, are you ready?
Ready.
All right, let's do it.
Okay, well, thank you all so much. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Dov, for the partnership, and thank you, everybody, for joining and your interest. The intention here is to give a short overview, not an exhaustive one, but then also to have and explore the possibility of connecting with everyone here that's aligning with some of these basic ideas, and as Brian was saying, to see how we can collaborate to both transform business research, business education, and also business itself. So with that notion of humanistic leadership, I just want to share with you a couple of thoughts that you probably are all familiar with. We're in a VUCA world. We have many multiple crises together, and we can see, and Brian, I need you to go next.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. We can see that our organizations, those are the that aren't really fit for solving those problems yet. So we have the office and Dilbert as some kind of comedic relief of that evidence. Can you go next? But we also have the evidence that many people are disengaged at work across the globe. You all know quite resignation, the big resignation, all of those phenomena that are multiplying that. And next, Ryan. We see that there is not only that phenomenon, we see that in our youth and in general, anxiety is increasing, suicide rates are increasing, depression rates are increasing. So there is something missing here. And it also, next slide, Brian, showcasing and has been showcasing over time in mistrust towards organizations. And you see that mistrust play out in the vaccine discussion. You see that mistrust play out in many other ways politically across the globe. So currently, I think there is a big challenge towards the framework that we have for how we're organizing and how we lead. Brian, next. So the problems cannot be solved with the same mindset that created them. I think many of you have heard that phrase by now. Next. And what we're sort of simplifying here is that there is a shift, a paradigm shift, a mindset shift from an economistic model that takes on the foundation of economics as a science towards one that uses the emerging consilience of knowledge, which we frame humanistic. And in the economistic model, I put this cute little image of a triangular sandwich. I'm originally from Germany, so I never really saw these square breads, but they are quite prominent here in the United States. But they're symbolizing, in a way, here, the focus on maximization, on more. More is better. So anything that we do, including the responsible way to manage in the context of an economistic framework, is that we need to achieve more. It could be more power, more status, more market share, more profitability. And that if that happens, is a sign of good leadership and management. Now, it's getting a little bit more complicated if we take into consideration what we might actually need if we organize not only for more, but for better. And that's a quality orientation. And that's not a new orientation. Aristotle, many others are talking about that the goal of how we organize could be or should be human flourishing, well-being, eudaimonia. If we take that in consideration, I think there are two basic constraints that are also explicated by Kate Rayworth in her work on donut economics. We call them the dignity constraint, or that it's like we need to fulfill the social minima for everyone to live a life in dignity. And we need to respect that there are limits to growth. There are planetary
limits that we use for 30 use SLG.
Brian, can you mute Elizabeth?
Yeah.
Thank you. So then within that bagel model, we would say that good leadership is focused on creating better lives, better conditions for life with respect of the planetary boundaries and moving within a safe and just operating zone. That's what Kate Raworth suggests, by respecting the dignity for everyone. Next slide, Brian. So not to go into too much depth, but these two mindsets have been around. The economistic mindset is the dominant one, and it's founded and rooted in assumptions of human nature, a narrative about human nature that we're greedy bastards in a short, broad brushstroke version. The humanistic story that we are Homo sapiens that have developed certain capabilities to live together well and survive is and has been there, but it's, I think, in many ways not used as much to inform how we organize. And so next slide, Brian. While that economistic model and the economistic assumption of who we are as human beings is not totally inaccurate, there are people that are called psychopaths, people that have no morals, and they're esteemed to be about 1%. It's certainly not a very accurate representation for all of humanity. And next. And again, this is a broad brushstroke argument. I'm provoking here a little bit, but Michael Jensen and others at some point shared that the way that we organize based on this insight of economics and finance to create better lives is based on this Homo economicus assumption. He creates a model that's a bit more refined. He calls it the REM model. We can talk about that more if you're interested. I can also give you citations in my book, which sort of explicate that and debunk it. But that is the foundation that we are living with intellectually, the intellectual infrastructure in which we create organizations, in which we sort of lead and manage. Right, next. The interesting thing in my intellectual journey is that evolution and natural sciences, biology, and you could also go back to even physics, they share a very different perspective on reality and who we are. And in a very short cut is our species has developed from Homo habilis to Homo erectus to Homo sapiens in major shifts in which new drives, Paul Lawrence calls them drives, have emerged that allow us to survive. They were the key for our survival as Homo sapiens. And it may be said that right now we're violating them. But just to very quickly go through that, we have evolved as many other species that have survived with a drive to acquire and a drive to defend those things that we need to acquire. Those are basic conditions for our own survival. So we all have that. And in the limbic system, you can see those modalities play out. But our species was not stopped with Homo habilis. We developed to Homo erectus, which was able to survive in a VUCA environment at the time because of collaboration, because we weren't individuals. We weren't looking to just maximize our own benefit. We were learning how to collaborate as tribes. So this is the drive to bond. And we're fundamentally social. E.O. Wilson calls it eusocial. And this is still part of our genetic makeup, if you wish to say. The Homo erectus also did not survive. Homo sapiens emerged because the prefrontal cortex and all of the new brain development allowed us to do abstract thinking and problem solving. And those kind of transitions in our species are marked in multiple ways, that we created religions and meaning-making systems to answer to the question why. So we're fundamentally in need of sense-making and purpose. So those are the 4 drives, according to Paul Lawrence, that allowed our species to survive. the interesting thing here is that every time we maximize one of those drives, we're actually not in good condition. So next slide. So it is actually survival as a function of the balance of those 4 drives. So this is the natural science perspective, but if you look at philosophy, if you look at theology, if you look at what E.O. Wilson calls the consilience of knowledge, it actually converges around this human nature understanding. And that what Darwin also said, that we need to have a certain sense of morality. We're fundamentally social, and morality and ethics and the question of how we should live is a key to our survival. And so we have religions and all of those narratives emerge as a way for us to live better, to lead better lives. And what this global ethic research of Hans Küng and others says is that there is this notion of dignity, respecting people for being human. Next, right? And while the economistic perspective basically says, like it or not, individuals are willing to sacrifice a little of almost anything we care to name for a price. Others have said, Henry Mintzberg and others would call this, we're all whores. That is contrasted with the perspective that there are certain things that have a price and others have dignity. And whatever has dignity cannot be part of a market system, cannot be exchanged. So in a system where we have lots of markets dominating our logic of exchange, it is probably intuitive that dignity is neglected. Next. So here is an advertisement, which some of you may recognize. It's a global advertisement. It's been one of the longest running advertisements, but I just wanted to highlight, this is appealing to the notion of what Kant calls dignity, right? There's something that things cannot buy. Those are the things that represent dignity, the best things in life, right? So in terms of leading, next, Ryan. In terms of leading, if we consider those things as critical, then there are, in the context of humanistic management, these factors that we call dignity thresholds. Those elements that are not part of a market exchange that we need to respect. And we can see that and we can view that as the balance of the 4 drives in ourselves that we need to honor, but also in other people. And when we honor that, when we protect dignity, then we can lead towards well-being and flourishing. So that's what we propose as a notion of humanistic leadership. Right, next. So again, going back to these cute pictures, one is seeing leading as maximization, and the other one is seeing leading as protecting dignity and promoting flourishing within the planetary boundaries. Right, next.
And so, Michael, at this point, I'm going to move us to Mentimeter to give people a chance to react to a little bit of what you just shared with us. I think a powerful thing, and he does have more to share. But I'm going to put in the chat, in order to participate in this poll that you see up on the screen, you can see it at the top, you go to www.menti.com. You can do that in another browser or in your mobile device. And then you type in the 8-digit code that you can see on the top of the screen or that I just put in the chat. We love this tool, and we'll do 2 questions here and give Michael a chance to react to them and then also continue adding to them via his presentation. So which of the following challenges most need to be addressed by humanistic leadership? Michael started off his presentation and throughout referenced a variety of different things that could benefit from humanistic leadership. And great, you see as votes come in, more dots will go to a variety of these different perspectives. You can vote for more than one along the way. But we'll just give a few moments for this to come up. And you see stress and mental health, poverty, environmental sustainability, isolation or loneliness, war. Michael referenced trust in our institutions, whether that's businesses or government or NGOs, a lack of human flourishing, greed, and distribution of wealth. And if you look at the very bottom right, I can see that 19 people have responded so far. More responses keep coming in. I love to see it. Michael, anything that stands out to you as you see these responses coming in? Definitely dots by all of them. Some focus around flourishing, around stress and mental health. What stands out to you?
Well, I think the stress and mental health piece is interesting because that seems to be almost the leading, well, lack of human flourishing now and environmental sustainability. But yeah, that's interesting. I think that's what we most experience directly.
Yeah, I see that as well. And I see that there are, what I like about this is there are many challenges in our world that humanistic leadership can address, at least in part, and multiple different modalities through which this can be helpful in our world today. So thank you all for sharing that. I see a couple more still coming in there. For the moment, lack of human flourishing has the top spot, but a variety of different things that are impacted. I'm going to move us forward to a second one. This is where you can type in a word. And so Michael shared the beginnings of, the model of humanistic leadership. When you think of humanistic leadership, what words come to mind in your own life to describe that? And as they come up, they'll form a word cloud. And so you'll see all of them, but words that have multiple responses will get larger and will go to the center. And so we'll give a moment for that. You see those words are starting to come up now, and we'll give a moment for that to come together. And again, Michael and I will react to that a little bit. Michael, I'm not surprised to see dignity at the center, certainly based on your work and the presentation so far. I also love that empathy has come up a variety of different times. How do we show empathy? I now see compassion coming up as well. Michael, as you see these words coming up, a couple go into the center. What stands out to you?
I'm actually looking at the margins because that's where maybe some of the
different thoughts come in.
Novelty comes in.
And it is moving around a lot. I see emotional intelligence. Go ahead. Sorry.
Everyone matters. Engagement, solidarity, humane, challenge, equality, ethical, common good. Yeah, all of those words are curiosity. I like curiosity. Okay. Yes. Obama.
I see the word love has come up. I don't know if you want to address that specifically at all or not. Is humanistic leadership love? Is love connected to this work?
Well, the most recent book that we edited is on love and the organization. And I just come back from a company called SICM. They have coined a term called the economy of love. And in one of our research groups, we have a research group on agape, on a type of love in organization. And I think very early on in our work, we used the word love in some presentations, and we were basically escorted out. Now that's sort of entering the conversation newly. I think that's very, very powerful and interesting to see.
Yeah. Michael, I do want to give you the chance to address this. A great comment in the chat, the difference between humanistic leadership and humanistic management in your mind.
Yeah, so that's a good question. And we're playing with terms here for pragmatic reasons. I think there is an article out that is very influential that distinguishes leadership and management. I'm not sure that I agree with that distinction, but many people see that as such. Bob Chapman hates management because he has a particular way of understanding management. But in the end, to me, the difference is not in those words. It's more in the practice of how you protect dignity, honor dignity, and promote well-being. And when you do that, then you can call it conscious leadership, you can call it ethical leadership, you can call it humanistic leadership, you can call it management, you can call it organizing. I think that's one of the ways it may fit best, like how do we organize, and calling it however based on those terms. I think that it doesn't matter. But yeah, we can play with the difference for intellectual reasons.
And just comment out, sorry, what's the article about the difference? Do you know the specific?
It's an HBR piece. It's pretty old, but you can Google it. I don't know the particular reference, but maybe I'm sure some people here do.
Okay, well, if somebody knows that, please put it in the chat. If not, we'll make sure we get that link or whatever out to you. But Michael, I love the interaction we just had on Mentimeter, and I think it's a great lead in to this slide about how we put call it humanistic management, call it humanistic leadership, but how do we put it into practice?
Right. Yeah, and so I think that's sort of what we got very early on. It's like, well, that isn't real. That isn't real. And then when you look at organizations, and especially when you look at organizations when they start, it's almost always a humanistic approach to management if they work. If you are successful in putting a group together of people that work together towards a shared common goal, that's basically requires an intuitive understanding that you respect the people that you work with, that you honor their dignity, and that you're doing it for something bigger than just the money. The money is important, but it's an instrument. And yes, it's critical, much like blood is, or red blood cell, I think Ed Freeman calls that, the red blood cell analogy. Red blood cells are important, but it's not our purpose to produce red blood cells. So what is the higher purpose if you have that? And I would assert it's a form of contributing to the common good. And we see that many organizations are doing that. They're not the most popular, they're not the most famous, they are, but they exist, and they're huge. I did not put Barry Wehmiller here on this slide yet, but many of these organizations are billion-dollar organizations. And I'm sure that many here are familiar with all these new concepts, recent concepts of social enterprise, of the B Corp, of the economy for common good. There's economy of communion. There are all kinds of ways where we say, where people are intuiting that we can organize better around different principles. So the next slide. So basically what we're saying here is reality proves possibility. These organizations exist, these leaders exist, they practice that. So it's a reality, so it's possible. So I think what's missing oftentimes is that many people that I interact with, my students included, are not aware of those stories. And they are more aware of the stories of the traditional corporate model, the ones that are publicly listed, that the business press can talk about. And those are tending to be economistic examples, economistic stories, not the type of leadership that we're talking about here. And I think there is a reason why Barry Wehmiller is a privately held company. And there is a reason why some of the founders of the other organizations here were very hesitant to play with bigger corporates. You see an image here of Ben and Jerry's when they were selling their company, well, when it was taken over by Unilever. Anita Roddick from The Body Shop. You have Bernie Glassman, he founded a company called Grayston Bakery. Joe Kenner, who's the current CEO. And then I put an image here of an Egyptian company called Sekem that some of you might have heard of, but many people probably don't. But what they did, just as an example of the power of humanistic leadership, is they turned a desert, as you can see down there, into a flourishing oasis. And they do that through many humanistic principles. You see the circle here that they do, which is how they start every day, by honoring and by seeing and validating each other, by standing in a circle. It's a very simple thing. It's probably very weird for most organizations to think about that, but that's how they have created community intentionally over time. They also created a university, they created schools, they created a whole society basically in and around companies and the ambition to create a flourishing landscape.
Michael, I think this is a great time to address one of the questions that came up in the chat. How is the humanistic perspective different from stakeholderism? So I know sometimes we talk about having multiple stakeholders involved. What is the similarities and differentiation that you see there?
Yeah, so I think stakeholderism or stakeholders or including stakeholders, that can happen in multiple ways. And that was sort of, I think, Ed Freeman's contribution. And we now talk about stakeholder capitalism. And you see that in the Business Roundtable statements, that we're including stakeholders in a way that, yeah, they have a say or they're important. And yes, that is a almost self-evident insight, right? At the same time, I think you'll see that many people are talking about stakeholders, involving stakeholders in a very pragmatic, instrumentalist way. There is no particular regard for dignity. of stakeholders.
Mm.
They are involved potentially because they're useful, because they're stakeholders, because they're important to the process. But oftentimes you hear how you manage stakeholders. It's almost like a manipulation of stakeholders, how you communicate with them, how you appease them, how you look to understand their interests, but you're not necessarily seeing them as people. And a number of folks in the conversation around Ed and others is like, yeah, well, it is open to many ways of looking at stakeholders that don't necessarily have to be humanistic. Now, yes, sure, normative stakeholders do attend to common good. That's absolutely true, Sumit. And that could be a version of a humanistic lens, absolutely. What we're trying to specify here is, what does it mean when you're saying normative? And we're just basically saying those two conditions: protect the dignity of those stakeholders and promote the well-being of everybody involved. And yes, absolutely, then the stakeholder perspective is compatible, and it's not the same.
Wonderful. Well, one of the things we have here, I'm going to ask Michael to speak to both of these organizations briefly. Then I have some Mentimeter, and we'll go to our breakout groups. You see that there is an invitation here, and I'll make sure you have this at the end of our time together as well. But there are groups of people working together, forming networks to make humanistic leadership and humanistic management more common in today's world, and continue to share this message. And so, Michael, do you want to give a short overview of these two institutions and how they're encouraging humanistic leadership in the world?
Yeah, so the Humanistic Management Association, the International Humanistic Management Association is a group of about 5,000 people that are working together towards transforming research, education, and practice. And we have various formats in which we do that. We have book series, we have a journal, we have a number of other activities going on. And we invite people to connect, to work with us. We have a number of book series, so we're focusing more heavily, I think, right now still on the research and academic outreach, but increasingly we're working with other like-minded organizations like Barry Wehmiller, like others in the space, SECAM I mentioned as well. And we created a Humanistic Leadership Academy because we saw that's what's wanted and needed in the space, not only for business professors, but also for business practitioners. And so as part of that effort, we put up this series, we have a manifesto, we have a cohort for people that are interested in learning more about humanistic leadership. And that is the invitation. And maybe you want to put in the website where we invite everybody here who hasn't signed the manifesto yet to sign it. And if you're interested in being more connected and more involved through the Humanistic Leadership Academy, please let us know. Feel free to sign up for the newsletter of the Humanistic Management Association, where you'll hear other broader engagement opportunities as well. But yeah, that's that. And we're here to engage with you to see how we can move the overall intention forward.
Well, thank you, Michael. I'm going to go back to Mentimeter for two additional questions that everybody can engage in. And I'm going to put us in some breakout groups to debrief the experience, and we'll pull it all back together. Just a quick, this is a multiple choice question. How well is humanistic leadership taught in colleges and universities today? And honestly, I don't have an expectation of how people will respond on this call. This is obviously people interested in humanistic leadership and humanistic management, but really curious, about having us kind of begin to assess where are we today versus where we might want to be in the future. And Michael, could I ask you to give your response, if you wouldn't mind? How well do you think it's taught in colleges and universities today?
Well, of course, I'm biased because I'm luckily the department chair, and we did a major shift in the way that we teach it. And I am very grateful to my colleagues to sort of collaborate and connect on that. So we are doing that in one course out of, I believe, maybe 50 for seniors, and 30 for, not seniors, for undergraduate. And then it's, I think, 30 for graduate students. So it's minimal in that context. There are some other courses or some other departments that could align with that, but overall it's much like the challenge for business ethics. You have the fig leaf effect. You teach 29 courses in the economistic paradigm, and then you have one about ethics or one about humanistic leadership to cover your ground, but it's not the main message that students walk away with. So I would agree with the majority perspective here that we can do a lot better.
Yeah, and so now a more open invitation through Mentimeter that'll build another word cloud. What is missing in our teaching of humanistic leadership at colleges and universities? I wasn't sure how we responded to the last one. It was pretty strong, as to the opportunity to teach more, better, or different in terms of humanistic leadership, and thought we'd give people a chance to respond through Mentimeter. And then we're going to give you a chance to move into breakout sessions and really just consider what stands out to you from what Michael has shared and what's possible in our world today. And I love that in the chat right now, some people are sharing some other ways that they've connected with some of these ideas: humanistic psychology, Chinese art history, Confucian philosophy. And maybe, Michael, you could make a comment on that as the word cloud continues to build, that I don't believe humanistic leadership is trying to suggest that there aren't a lot of places that people can come to this. You've mentioned Aristotle and others already. It's actually about the confluence and alignment from a number of different backgrounds and methodologies.
Yeah, absolutely. And I thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, this is not meant to be something novel. This is a collection of sort of shared principles that we argue are universal. And I think the one key thing that I see happening right now is in the world at large, we're rejecting globalization. We're rejecting what we built as a pathway towards collaboration internationally since 1945, because it was built on this homo economicus assumption. And it shows up that that is not something that people actually want. It doesn't serve humanity. So you see this regression towards tribalism and towards particularism, and on both political spectrums, right? One is focused on identity, the other one is focused on tribe. And so what we're saying is that there is a universalist perspective, but we need to really go deeper in terms of understanding what all the cultures share at its core, what all the religious traditions share, what evolution allows us to see. And I'm very hopeful that there is such a large overlap that is universalist, that includes the Chinese perspectives, the Sufi perspectives, the Latin American culture, the indigenous cultures and their insights and wisdom, along with some of the traditions of more modern type.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. And just as everybody looks at the word cloud that's coming up, lots of different, but I think aligned ideas. I see commitment and strong leadership at the center. So thank you for everybody that responded to that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put you into breakout groups for 10 minutes. This is the time. Please, as you get into that breakout group, unmute yourself. Please turn on your video. This is a chance to meet other people. If you would first just briefly introduce yourself, who you are and where you're coming from. And then I'm putting 2 questions in the chat right now. Address them as you have time. I'm going to give you 10 minutes. What stands out to you from Michael's overview on humanistic leadership? And what questions need to be answered to promote this kind of thinking moving forward? If you're not familiar with Zoom breakout groups, you're going to get a button that comes up that says join. That gets you there faster. And if you don't click that button, then it eventually takes you there in about a minute. So I have just opened all the rooms. You'll be in a room of about 5 or 6 people, and we encourage you to have a good dialogue, and we'll see you back here in 10 minutes. Hello and welcome back. People will continue to come back over the next 30 seconds to a minute or so. I hope you're going to have a good conversation in your breakout room. As we get everybody back, we're going to invite people to share the product of their breakout room, the conversation. The best way to do that will be if you can utilize the reactions button at the bottom, where you can raise your hand. And so that'll just be the best way to allow people to kind of let us know who wants to share that. You can also type things in the chat, and I'll repeat that information in just a moment as we're getting everybody back now. Some people come a little faster, some a little slower back through cyberspace. We hope that you had a chance to collaborate with a couple of other people to react to and reflect upon what was shared. Also, perhaps to make a colleague, a connection somewhere else in the organization. As I was saying to a few others, now's going to be our time for dialogue and questions. And so if you could, at the bottom of your screen should be something called reactions, which gives you the opportunity to raise your hand. If you'd like to come off mute and share, please raise your hand, or you can also go ahead and type a comment or question in the chat, and we'll utilize the balance of our time. We got about 12 minutes left to go ahead and do that along the way. I think a few people just coming back, and I want to make sure I've got Michael back. I assume that I do. Michael, are you out there?
Oh, I am. Let me raise
Good.
my
Okay, just so I
hand
can
so
see
you
on the
can
screen
see.
now.
I know. It's
Yeah.
hard.
No. Forgive me. I don't know exactly how to pronounce your name, but Sumit, if I'm pronouncing that close to correctly, would you like to come off mute and share a comment with us?
Yeah, so thank you for the opportunity. We were from group 4, and actually we discussed the specific comment made by Michael when he said that there were, so his colleagues used to have 50 courses for instrumentalism or profit and only 1 course towards business ethics. So our group discussed it and found that that the concept of humanistic leadership or humanism as such has got a lot of closed door neighbors, very near neighbors, like business ethics, stakeholderism, the contemporary organizational behavior and organizational relationship, which has been there in the management world for long. Plus, the most important thing, which our group think as of now, which is prohibiting attention to humanistic management and leadership and humanistic understanding inside the society, is the measurement of the value or the measurement of an output. In fact, there is a measurement available for accounting, profit, and instrumentalism, but there is no measurement available, at least for this part of the understanding. That's it.
Thank you, Michael. Do you want to react to that?
Well, so I mean, the measurement question is critical, right? Assessment question is critical. I think building community, as I think Woo Ji Yoon is sharing, that's something that we need to do if we want to do system change. And so I invite you all, if you have good ideas, we're working in parts with AECSB and the new ranking PIR. So there are many different attempts, and we need your support.
Excellent. Dav, you're the next person to raise their hand.
Yeah, we had a wonderfully passionate conversation in our group, and one of them was that if we were to invest in the humanness of an organization, we'd have to sacrifice something, and generally profit. You know, we'd have to sacrifice profit to be able to fully invest in the humanness of it. And you know, there were several examples that Michael gave of organizations where, because they've invested in the humanness of it, it actually shows up in such a positive way in the profit side of it. So that was one of the conversations. And then the other one is that expectation already exists out there. That's the environment that people already have, is that I've got to sacrifice something. So why would I want to sacrifice profit and invest in the humanness of it? And so until we acknowledge that already exists, we don't get to go on a new journey as like, is it possible that if we invest in humans, that it'll positively show up in our accounting?
And Barry Waymer will stand as one example of that I don't have time to go into right now. But yes, we certainly believe we're proving, along with other companies, that can actually be more profitable by more historical measures. So, Dov,
I may have given them as an example. Funny enough.
Well, I appreciate it. And again, forgive me if I mispronounce your name, Najuma, if I'm pronouncing it close.
Yes, that's correct. I actually have a request that Lanny Vincent raise his digital hand and unmute. I was in a breakout session with him, and my request is that he shares what he was talking about around competitive borders and things transcending competitive borders. And then also he was talking about historically how we've been organized around efficiency, and there being a shift around being organized around evolution.
Lanny, you've just been voluntold to share. Would you accept that request?
I'm gratified. You made my day. I'll try not to talk too long. So, especially with an invitation, it's very seductive. I've been studying. So my background is I'm a recent sojourner in the academy. I got invited to teach at Santa Clara University in the School of Engineering. I'm not an engineer, but I spent 45 years of my life professionally organizing and facilitating collaborative invention and foresight work with corporations around the world. It was a real privilege. And it strikes me that, humanistic management begs the question of what's human. And it seems like, however we define what's human, whether they're great examples, Jesus, Gandhi, Buddha, or others, that however our tradition helps us understand that what is human is definitely across borders, this notion of crossing borders. And there's a tremendous number of borders, both national borders, but also competitive borders between companies in the same market, between different markets, and so on. And it seems to me that when we cross borders, we're touching what is truly human, at least in a tangential way, maybe a closer way. I found that corporations have long ago been clear that they must collaborate with diverse expertise. That's a sine qua non. It's an ante. It's not even questioned. You have to do it. And when I came into got invited, because I wrote a couple of books on innovation theology, I got invited to Santa Clara. I found it an ecosystem, not an organization. And it's not very collaborative at all. In fact, I'm not sure collaboration is understood. It's often mistaken with coordination and cooperation. There's really severe silos. And it's a part of the incentive system in the academic world. So I actually believe that organizations organize for the purpose of either efficiency, production efficiency, and therefore they're very hierarchical in their structure, or difficult to do both, they're organized around collaboration to promote learning. So Eri DeJus, Nonaka, Takeuchi all talk about knowledge creation or learning as the essence. And so I think, and that happens across borders, by the way. And so it's really, I think, learning how to cross borders, be comfortable with that, and tear down the borders, but provide the focus as well, what I call the plumb line, which came from an Old Testament prophet, Amos, one of his visions. So I don't know if I'm addressing what you wanted me to address, Juma, but I find that however we define the human, certainly one element is that which is true across borders.
Lanny, thank you for that. Michael, I want to give you a chance to respond to that, just as you think about humanistic leadership and this definition of being human. I saw it in the chat as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's the work that we've done intellectually. I think that's maybe one of the contributions that we can provide, where there is a different ontology, a different perspective of humanity that we can use to build our economics, but also our management and leadership perspectives on. And right now, the dominant perspective that you see in many contexts, Lanny, you're describing an administrative model that sort of formed out of a different perspective, a different ontology too, But the market perspective is based on Homo economicus, and we have market and we have administration, and then we have community. And I think that's the part that we're focusing on. What does it look like if we build organizations around the notion of community? And it's been done. It's not novel. It's just something that most of us don't look into as much as we could.
Joel, I'm going to give you the last comment or question and then move us to kind of wrap up a little bit. Joel Herman.
Thank you. One of my takeaways at a personal level from our little multinational groups conversation was that if we want to create humanism or more humanism in the world, we need, as Gandhi said, to be the change that we want to bring about.
I just say I love it. Michael, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, so with that, I want to invite you all to be the change that you want to see in the world and collaborate with us in this context of the Humanistic Leadership Academy. Brian, can you just pull that up? Or
Yep.
Oh, okay. So can you put the link in so that everybody that hasn't yet signed the manifesto gets a chance or another invitation to sign it? And again, if you're interested in being the change, Joel and others here, we're starting new cohorts. We're currently with the third cohort, and maybe Brian, you want to share a little bit more about that, you too. And we're going to start a cohort focused on Mexico. So I welcome all the friends in Latin America on this call, because that's the next setup. But we want to invite everybody that's excited about this as a possibility to share that as a pathway where we learn together in community to be the change that we want to see, that to be more human, to be better, more effective humanistic leaders, if we want to call that. So that's the invitation. And thank you, Joel, for teeing that up.
Well, yeah, and I see multiple comments in the chat, Michael, of people asking, hey, how do we collaborate with other academics? How do we get involved? That was kind of the purpose of today's presentation as an invitation, so that you could understand what Michael and others of us mean by humanistic management and humanistic leadership, and that open invitation to come together. I hope one of the things you take away is that Michael represents a whole network of individuals, many of you on this call, who are in the International Humanistic Management Association, you're in the Humanistic Leadership Academy, you're in other groups that are all aligned and trying to go in the same direction. We want to connect people that are in these various, if IHMA, if HLA could be part of co-sponsoring, collaborating, partnering with other groups, committees, nonprofits, faculty groups, Academy of Management, whatever, that's one of our goals, is to foster that collaboration. The second goal is very personally to provide resources that can help you in your evolution as your own human being, and in your teaching and leadership in the variety of institutions that you're part of. And so I'll reiterate specifically, as Michael said, you can get more information by going to www.humanisticleadershipacademy.org. That's also in the chat. There you can sign the manifesto, and there it's your opportunity to share your email address and get more invitations to things like this. We do sponsor professor cohorts, groups of professors meeting together to together learn how to teach and be and know more about humanistic leadership. We're going to continue to do more webinar series. We wanted to test the waters with the interest in something like this. Thank you for your interest today. We plan after the first of the year to have more of a webinar series, which is both to share information, but also give a platform for some of the amazing people on this call to share what you're doing in your group, in your university, with your research along the way. And so we invite everyone to be connected. If nothing else, email Michael Pirson. You see his email at the bottom. Email myself, Brian Wellinghoff. You have my email in the chat. And we just couldn't be more thankful for your engagement today. I'll give Michael the final word. And just really none of this would be possible without Michael's leadership, scholarship, and commitment to this work. So Michael, thank you so much for taking your time today to share and continue to sponsor this group and this networking. And so we'll give you the final comment as we close today.
Well, thank you all. It's just a comment or a sharing of gratitude. I thank you for being here. Thank you for your interest. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Dov. Thank you all for being here. Ariane, thank you for your support. Everybody, please, I hope that we hear more from you, that we can connect and move this forward. And so thanks again. And let's go on and change the world together.
Let's create a world that works for 100% of humanity through this. I see the hearts, I see the claps. Thank you all. Wherever you go in the balance of your day, I hope you take a smile and an inspirational belief that we can be part of making a better world. Thank you so much for your time today. Take care, everybody.